to Exodus chapter 32. Moses had gone up to Mount Sinai with God to the top. Everybody else is back down at the camp. And God writes out the commandments for Moses on 2 tablets and presents it to him. And God's been preparing a man for a long time. And you know He's preparing men and women today. He takes time with us. With Moses, He sent him to Egypt. Allowed him to get there. Providence. Born there. It says in Acts chapter 7, verse 22, that Moses was trained there in Egypt. Trained in all the wisdom and knowledge that the Egyptians had. Educated. Bright shining star of the Egyptians there. And he jumped out there because he knew the call of God in his heart. But he didn't know the Lord and His ways. As he jumped out and tried to set the Israelites free from the bondage that they were in, he ended up doing something that God didn't desire him to do. God took him to the desert. And he spent 40 years in the backside of the desert. God was preparing him. And then when God shows up to send him to Egypt, back to Egypt, to tell Pharaoh to set his people free, he didn't want to go. He said, send anybody but me. As I thought about that, God delivered him from self-confidence, which is what he had initially. And now, after the backside of the desert, He's brought him to a place where he has no confidence. The next step is to develop God confidence. And that's going to take a whole lot longer. And He's going to do it step by step, progressively. All this has taken place. Now He's at the top of Mount Sinai with God. He's gone from self-confidence to no confidence to God confidence. And now God is going to use him. And He sends him back down to speak to the people and bring the lost to them. And in verse 7 of Exodus chapter 32, it says this. Then the Lord said to Moses, go down, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them, and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed it, and have said, these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. I have seen these people, the Lord said to Moses. They are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone, so my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them. and then I will make you into a great nation. But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. In other words, he didn't just take God's words and split. But it says Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. He said, O Lord, why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt, with great power and a mighty hand? And he appeals to what God has already done. And he says, why should the Egyptians say it was with evil intent that he brought them out? In other words, Lord, they strike at your integrity. It was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth. Turn from your fierce anger and relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Far be it from you, Lord, to do that. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self. And you keep your word, Lord, right? I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants all this land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever. You said that, Lord. And then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. Deuteronomy chapter 9 tells us a little more. In Deuteronomy 9, verse 9, it says, when I went up on the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Lord had made with you, I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I had no bread and drank no water. And then in verse 13, it says this, and the Lord said to me, I have seen this people. They are a stiff-necked people indeed. Let me alone so that I may destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven. Verse 18. Then once again I fell prostrate before the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights. I ate no bread and drank no water because of all the sin you had committed, doing what was evil in the Lord's sight, and so provoking him to anger. I feared the anger and wrath of the Lord, for he was angry enough with you to destroy you. But again, the Lord listened to me, and the Lord was angry enough with you, Aaron, to destroy him. But at that time, I prayed for Aaron too. And then in chapter 10, verse 10, and this is important. Now I had stayed on the mountain 40 days and nights as I did the first time. And the Lord listened to me at this time also. It was not his will to destroy you. So, God wants to destroy the people, it says in Exodus 32. And he says, leave me alone so I can destroy them. But here in Deuteronomy it says it's not his desire to destroy the people. So, is he talking out of both sides of his mouth or what? No, not at all. God is fashioning a heart in Moses. He's been doing this all these years, all this process, from self-confidence to no confidence to God confidence. He's been showing his ways to Moses, and he's been fashioning him. And as the people are down in the camp, and Aaron is fashioning an idol, God is fashioning a man in his heart up on top of the mountain. And he's preparing him. And when he spoke to God and he interceded for the people, that was God who had prepared a man's heart, and God is interceding through him for the people. Now, that's what he's doing with us. Same thing. Timmy gets up here to lead us in worship with Noah and Abby. God has been fashioning their hearts all through the week, whatever's been going on, all through the years, fashioning their hearts. It's the same with me. It's the same with Gary. It's the same with all of us. And we're in process. And sometimes we get frustrated in the process, don't we? Sometimes we get discouraged in the process. Sometimes we wonder, why doesn't this happen quicker? Friends, we're being transformed degree by degree in the image of Jesus Christ. And Moses was being transformed as well. He was being fashioned, a man of God. Let me read the last part of that in verse 13 in Exodus 32. Moses says, remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. It's not like God is going, oh, that's right. Thank you. I forgot that. I forgot about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Yeah, that's right. It slipped my mind. That's not what's happening. But remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, Moses says to God, to whom you swore by your own self. Oh, that's right, I did. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. I will give your descendants all this land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever. Wow, he did say that. And then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. Now in 2 Chronicles 16, verse 9, I want to read a passage to you. Second Chronicles 16:9 says this, first part of that verse. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the whole earth. Picture that. God is searching for something, and his eyes are going throughout the whole earth. And he's looking for something. The eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him, devoted to him, fully committed to him. God is searching for people whose hearts want him, want more of him. And the interesting thing is we can have as much of the Lord as we want. Not just Moses, not just the Israelites, you and me. We can have as much of the Lord as we want. You believe that? That's what God is saying. You can have, you want more of me? He says, come to me. And you can have more. I remember as a young believer seeking the Lord, and he found me. And he came over me in such awesome ways. I was like kind of afraid. I didn't get this, you know. I mean, not kind of. I was. And no more. No more. Okay. But now, you know, as we grow, we understand this a little bit more. At first it's strange. No, I want more, Lord. I want more of you. But at times that will come at a cost, because he brings us to places, to bring us to a place of more yieldedness to him, so that he can give us more of himself. In Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 29, it says this: the people of the land practice extortion and commit robbery. They oppress the poor and needy and mistreat the alien, denying them justice. So the people of the land were doing evil. And so God is at the place of considering wiping them out, right? But what is he searching for? He's searching for someone that he can use to stand in the gap for the people. And in verse 30 it says this, I look for a man, I look for a person among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it. But I found none. So God searched for a person that he could use, but he couldn't find one. But in that day, God searched for a man, and he found Moses. When he came to Moses, when he was ready, he said, take anybody but me. Anybody. Anybody do a better job than me. I'm not any good. I don't speak well. We know from Acts 7:22 that he was powerful in word and deed. But he's telling God, I don't speak well. Take my brother. Anybody. Don't take me. And he said, you're ready. You're ready. See, when we're weak, now I can make you strong. Now you just got to trust me. He's looking for a man to stand in the gap. He's looking for a woman to stand in the gap. And so Moses, when he heard that God might destroy the people, what did he do? He stood in the gap. And he interceded. He began to pray for the people. Oh, Lord, you promised. And he prays the promises back to the Lord. And God relents, which is exactly what he wanted to do in the first place. James 5:16 talks about the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous person. And it means much before the throne of God. Do you believe you can be that righteous person and have that effectual, fervent prayer? See, God is looking for people to pray for other people. He's looking for people to pray for situations, for our world. And the Bible is continually calling us to hold up one another in prayer. Come together and pray for each other. People sick, pray for them. Our country, pray for our country. Pray for the leaders. Always be holding people up in prayer. And one day, when you stand before God, he's going to talk to you about those prayers. He's going to remind you of them. Remember when you prayed for so-and-so? Thank you for doing that. Well done. Good and faithful servant. Back in Exodus 32. Let's continue. Verse 15. God has relented. Moses is on the top of the mountain. Then it says Moses turned and he went down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands. And they were inscribed on both sides, front and back. And the tablets were the word of God. The writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. And when Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to Moses, there's the sound of war in the camp. And Moses replied, it's not the sound of victory. It's not the sound of defeat. It's the sound of singing that I hear. And when Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. They've broken the law, he breaks the tablets. And in verse 20 he says, he took the calf they had made, and he burned it in the fire. And then he ground it to powder, scattering it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. Do you think he's ticked off? He ground up this golden calf like flakes of snow now, puts it in the water, it comes downstream. He's, all right, you guys, drink. So he makes them drink it. As I thought about this righteous anger, because that's what it is, it's a righteous anger. I thought about others that have shown righteous anger in the Scriptures. Jesus did on a number of occasions, didn't he? Yeah. Remember when Jesus saw the money changers in the temple? Remember that? Remember what he said to them? At one time he called the Pharisees, told them, he said, you whitewashed sepulchres, full of dead men's bones. But he rebuked them when they were ripping the people off. And so righteous anger displayed there. How about the Baptists with the Pharisees? When he rebuked them when they were coming to be baptized, he said, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? You snakes. He said, bring forth bring forth fruit. Then you can come back. And the Apostle Paul, remember when the circumcisers had changed the gospel message? And so they told the people, fine, you can believe in Jesus, but you got to be circumcised too. And Paul was ticked off about this because adding to the gospel means there is no gospel. There is no good news when you add to it or you take away from it. And so he says, if you want to tell them to be circumcised, why don't you guys just go all the way and just castrate yourself, basically is what he said to them. So yeah, was he angry? Yeah, he was angry. So righteous anger is displayed. And sometimes in our life, we've displayed perhaps righteous anger. And in verse 21, Moses speaks to Aaron, his brother. He said, what did this people do to you, Aaron, that you led them into such a great sin? And Aaron says, do not be angry, my lord. Aaron answered, you know how prone these people are to evil. They said to me, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. So I told them, whoever has any gold, jewelry, take it off. And then they gave me the gold, and we threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. He just popped out. And his nose is growing. He's just flat out lying with it. Zip. Pointing a finger at them. We just threw in some gold and the cat popped out. I mean, how does he, Aaron, God's, he's seen all this that has been going on and he just flat out lies to him. As if he could lie to God. Calf popped out. And Moses saw that the people were running wild. They're running wild. They're partying, drunk, immorality. It's an orgy. Moses saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control and so become a laughingstock to their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and he said, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. And all the Levites rallied to him. Then he said to them, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each man strap a sword to his side. Go back and forth through the camp. from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor. The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Then Moses said, "You have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day." I want to read to you something from Matthew's Gospel, the 10th chapter, verse 34. And this is Jesus' words. And Jesus says this, "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Not because you're an enemy of theirs, but they make themselves an enemy of yours. Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. And whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." And God is saying here, put me first in your heart. And hating your life means to put Jesus' desires and will before our own. See, we don't want to live. We want him to live through us. And that's what Paul said. Not that I live, but Christ liveth through me. And he's saying, here's some hard words for people. I mean, I think of my son, I think of my daughter, and gosh, he's saying here, you got to love me more. You got to put me before them. You got to make a choice here. You may have to make a choice here. If they're going wrong, don't go along with them. Don't compromise. You love them, but you love them, but there's a line you don't cross. And that's what Moses was doing when he was calling the people. Whoever's on our side, come to me. And all the Levites rushed to him, right? So he drew a line in the sand and he said, "Come to me. Those on our side are for us, and those over there, they're not." He says, "Go and kill them. Brothers, sisters, wives, husbands, whatever it might be." And that's what they did. Now I know they're under the law, they wrote the law, and we're under grace. But God is saying here through Jesus in Matthew, put me first. And so, even though you love them, you pray for them, you do anything for them, take my life rather than theirs. And really that's what Moses was doing up there too. He says, "Lord, if you're not going to spare the people, blame me. Take me, kill me, take my name out of your book." So, this is stuff that we can't do in our own energy and flesh. This is something that the Spirit of God does in our hearts. See, we need to press on and take hold of Christ daily. We need to be filled with the Spirit, continue to be being filled with the Spirit, because when we're not, you can bet that's when the adversary is going to show up. That's when he comes. At an opportune time. You know, haven't got a good night's sleep, stayed away from the Lord for a few days. That's when he shows up. Tries to get you to compromise or to give in. And our own willpower and our own strength, we can't stand. We need the power of God. We need his strength. And whatever we do, be empowered by God in doing it. Everything comes out of that relationship. So verse 28 of Exodus 32 says this: the Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Now here's the good thing. How many people were there? A couple million. 3,000 died. That's sad. But many didn't. And they did die because they would not stop what they were doing. They continued to do it. And then Moses said, you've been set apart, Levites, to the Lord today. You were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day. And the next day Moses said to the people, you have committed a great sin. But now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sins. He's going to go to the Lord and intercede for them, stand in the gap. So Moses went back to the Lord and said, oh, what a great sin these people have committed. They have made themselves gods of gold. But now, please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book you have written. Now, I'm not sure what he's referring to here. If he's referring to the book of life, then this appears to be saying that you can be blotted out of the book of life. And I don't personally believe that you can be in the sense of losing your salvation. However, if he's talking about the book of life, everybody's name is in the book of life. When they enter this life, their name is there. Right? And blotting them out would be taking them out of that book of life. And both views are argued. Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong to the Lord our God. The things that are revealed belong to us. And when you get into areas you don't understand, always go back to what you do understand. And remember, on a scale of 1 to 10, how certain are we of something? Is everything a 10? 9 or 8? Sometimes a 6? You lean a certain way, but I'm not real sure how that is. It's a good thing to remember those things so you don't get anxious. Now verse 33. The Lord replied to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. And that's the Son of God, before his incarnation. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sins. And the Lord struck the people with a plague because of what they did with the calf Aaron had made. And so there's consequences to their behavior. And they're going to have to experience that because they would not turn from the evil that they were doing. Those are challenging things, some of us, to listen. But the day of grace, and this is the day of grace, we can intercede for people. And so we should, while we have life, walk in that light that we have and be grateful. So let's do that right now. Father, I pray for all of us that are here this morning, for our family members that don't know you, or family members we're not certain about, or loved ones that we're not certain. Or maybe we are certain they're believers, and yet, Father, they're out of step with you. And you don't want harm to come into their life, and you've given them warning after warning. And Father, I pray that you would do what is needful to bring them to that place, Lord, where their hearts are open and they're coming to you because they desire, Lord, to know you and have more of you. Not something that we're trying to push upon them, but we bring them to you and we intercede, Lord. And we ask that you would lift the veil of blindness, if there is one, and that the light of your gospel would shine on their hearts, and you would reveal your great love for them. And Father, they would see clearly what has happened in their lives, and they would call out to you from the bottom of their hearts. In Jesus' name we ask this. Amen. Amen. The Lord bless you. You have a great day in the Lord. Don't forget to pray.